What is going on, Cultivate family? I hope you're having a good week wherever it is that you're listening to this from. We're going to talk about unconditional permission to eat today. But before we venture into that, let me just tell you about the nightmare I've been having the last 10 to 14 days. Some of you that follow me on Instagram might have seen that I had a bit of a freak accident when I was tidying up in the gym after a workout. Not the Friday that's just gone, the one before. I had resistance bands on a rack because I was doing banded chest flies. I also had a barbell on that rack because I had done front squats and some other stuff before. And that was my usual setup. In a CrossFit gym, you kind of set all your shit up in the rig and then you tidy it all down after. Totally normal. Finish the workout. And then as I was tidying away, one of the resistance bands essentially managed to ping the barbell off the rack and into the back of my leg. And it just absolutely clotheslined me. It took me out. I just dropped to the floor and it was maybe the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And I couldn't get up and I just couldn't believe it. And I gave myself like 5 to 10 minutes to sort of try and recover from it. And I just didn't. And I luckily managed to make it out to my car by hopping. So I give it up for that ankle break rehab I did last year. That side is now very strong. And then my friend had to come and pick me up and take me to accident and emergency. They treated it as a crush injury, but they couldn't do an ultrasound because they didn't have one. So they just sent me home on crutches. A week later, I still couldn't walk and was in agony. So I went to a different A&E that had an ultrasound. And they basically confirmed that I had torn 2 of the muscles in my calf, and that obviously explained the crazy bruising and the amount of pain that I was in. So I've been on crutches for a couple of weeks now, and obviously those of you that have followed me for a while know I've had some really bad luck with lower leg injuries, and I honestly can't believe I've ended up with another one. I'm trying so hard to kind of keep a level head about it and focus on the things that I can control and the things that I can do. So for me, that just means hammering up a body in the gym, which as a trans mass person, I absolutely love. But I am a bit gutted that it obviously, again, means no running for quite a while and probably no cycling for a little bit until I'm a bit more recovered. But honestly, I wouldn't recommend a calf tear or maybe any sort of muscle tear in general to anyone. My pain threshold is pretty high, but honestly, this is the worst pain I have ever felt. I've been waking up a lot around 3, 4 a.m. in the morning in agony, once painkillers are wearing off. But yeah, I'm definitely getting there. The pain isn't quite as bad. A lot of the swelling's gone down. The bruising's gone down. So fingers crossed, I'll be able to get on my bike soon and maybe start to walk without crutches soon. So that's my news for you this week. I hope you're all having a better couple of weeks than I am. And also just a big thank you to anyone that sent me like kind DMs on Instagram or any of my clients that have sent me messages or put notes in their check-ins. I just really appreciate it. And I know that especially like my Instagram followers and my clients will know how unlucky I've been with injury. And it sucks, but the reframe is I've spent a lot of time working on music outside of work because I've been training less and not taking 2 hours out of my day to train every day. So my working days have condensed and I've been making more music, which is really nice for me. So let's take the win there. And the other thing is because I'm not necessarily training 6 times a week anymore, I've been able to open up a little bit more space in my calendar to have some virtual coffee chats with you all. So if you do fancy booking in a chat with me to talk about your training, literally 15 minutes, absolutely free, I'll let you know if I can help you and you can maybe figure out if coaching might be a good fit with Fuzz Culture Club, but there's no obligation to sign up. So if you want to book in for one of those coffee chats, just shoot me a DM on Instagram or you can use the form that's in the show notes. Anyways, let's get into unconditional permission to eat. So you may have heard this term before, you may not. It's a premise that I use with a lot of the people I work with on nutrition. And when we say unconditional permission to eat, it's often normal to think, well, if I gave myself unconditional permission to eat, I'd just eat everything I'd put on loads of weight and I'd move backwards with my health goals. And I say backwards in inverted commas because it's absolutely not a backward step. But it can definitely feel like one if you have a history of restricting food or yo-yo dieting or disordered eating. So today I wanted to talk about what actually unconditional permission to eat is and what it can look like for you. So the preconception is that giving yourself unconditional permission to eat means you will always overeat, you will eat everything, and you'll maybe move into a place where you're actually more unhealthy. But what embracing unconditional permission to eat actually is removing food guilt, removing the good and bad mentality that we can sometimes have when it comes to certain foods. It's understanding that food doesn't have a morality. It's never inherently good or bad, and that we can have foods fit our lifestyle and goals, and all foods are inclusive to a balanced, healthy diet. Because as soon as we start to think of food as good and bad, that's when we start to attach guilt or shame around our food choices, which can lead to self-sabotage, overeating or binge eating, and low self-esteem and mental well-being. And often, if I start the process of working on unconditional permission to eat with a client, they will have a true fear of overeating, and that is completely valid. It was absolutely the same for me as well. So, when we think about the process of embracing unconditional permission to eat, what that might involve is that we may initially eat more than we intend or plan to in the short run at the beginning, because what we're doing is repairing all of the restriction that we've once placed on ourselves, all of the good and bad or holds that we've placed around food. So it's completely normal that you might end up eating a little more of certain foods like snacky things, fast food, calorie dense food that you've maybe once deemed bad or off limits to yourself. The important thing here is that once you've gone through that phase, life returns to normal, because we need to overcome our scarcity mindset around food and create more of an abundance mindset around it, and understand that all foods, all types, and all calorie amounts are allowed at any point in our day-to-day diet, not just as a treat or for special occasions. And a lot of us that have done diets or had certain upbringings will have been brought up with a big scarcity mindset around food. It's really, really normal. And obviously that is changing. But if you're an 80s, 90s, or a noughties kid, the chances are you may have been brought up with that. I've got clients who were often refused certain foods as kids, told it was bad, had certain things kept from them so they wouldn't be eaten. And that scarcity mindset of those foods has stuck with them for a lifetime, and it takes a lot of practice and work to undo. But again, all part of the process. I also have some clients that maybe were brought up in an environment where parents or relatives or like family members were always on a diet and refusing or deeming certain foods as bad. And that mentality is then transferred over and kind of stuck with them. So as soon as you start to embrace unconditional permission to eat, it might naturally feel a bit scary at first because you're eating quantities of food that you're not comfortable with. But I promise it won't be like that forever. And as you get used to it, you'll find a bit more balance with it. And you'll return to thinking about what foods make you feel your best, and getting your protein in, your fruits and veggies in, whole foods in. So you do have more of a balance between those fun foods that you've once deemed off limits and nutritious foods alongside them. So a couple of examples here of what unconditional permission to eat could look like in action. You are having a day out with your mates and you go for a big hike. Then after that big hike, everyone wants to go to a pub for a big bowl of chips and some drinks. And you might have previously told yourself that chips are bad, they're off limits because they're a calorie-dense fried food. Also, when I say chips, I mean fries to my American family. And you might also tell yourself you can only drink alcohol when you've pre-planned it in your mind and restricted in the run-up. But a spontaneous moment, going to the pub to eat fries and have some drinks, with unconditional permission to eat, you enjoy the drinks and the bowl of fries with your mates. Because do you want to sit in a pub with Tupperware and eat chicken and broccoli while all your mates are having chips and pints? Probably not. And in the long run, will giving yourself permission to do things like that stop you from viewing chips, fries as scarce or off limits? Absolutely. Will that also mean that you don't binge or overeat on them in the future because you've created scarcity around them or deemed them not something you can eat? 100%. It won't happen overnight, but eventually you will get to that place. Another example is you go and meet a friend for coffee on a weekend, and the coffee shop has loads of delicious baked goods. And instead of saying, oh no, I can't have that, it's bad, you give yourself permission to enjoy a piece of cake with your coffee. And then you eat as normal the rest of your day. You don't eat any less. You eat your normal meals. Will that stop you from viewing cake as off limits? Absolutely. And will that mean you don't binge or overeat on it in the future? Yes, eventually. So giving yourself permission to have the slice of cake, have a couple of beers and some chips in the pub after a hike, go to the cinema and eat some fun snacks while you watch a movie, 100%, because you're not labeling them off limits anymore. And at first you may overeat on those things, but eventually when it becomes the norm, allowing yourselves things like that in your day-to-day nutrition, you won't feel the need to overeat on them because you know you can have them anytime you want. For me, I used to tell myself I couldn't eat bread, ice cream, or any sort of like pastry or baked goods. I don't know why it was those kind of 3, 4 things, but it was. So anytime I was somewhere where I had access to them, I would heavily overeat them. So like if I was on tour and there was catering and I was in Europe, so there was an insane amount of like pastry and baked goods laid out for my band backstage, I would binge on them or overeat to the point where I was uncomfortable. Or if I was at home, I would start buying those things in secret when I was feeling emotional or mentally not well. And I would use that as a form of emotional regulation instead of actually thinking what my body needed and what my mind needed. And then I would overeat or binge on them in private, which in turn gave me a lot of guilt and shame and made me feel sick every time. So then I would deem those foods as bad all over again. It was a real vicious cycle. But embracing unconditional permission to eat, I can now choose to eat those things whenever I want, which pretty much means I eat them when I fancy, but it's always in moderation alongside my other usual staple nutritious foods that I eat to fuel my body and make me feel good. And yes, sometimes I still do overeat, intentionally and unintentionally. But for the most part, that is very, very minimal. And what we need to remember is there is always going to be times in our life where we unintentionally or intentionally overeat. And that's okay. To finish off with, I want to give you a few tips into taking your first steps into giving yourself unconditional permission to eat. So the first step would be, think of any of those foods that you've deemed off limits or told yourself you can't eat. You've told yourself they're off the table, and allow yourself some of them. Buy them intentionally, have them in the house, and attempt to enjoy them mindfully. But if you do overeat them, don't then panic and take them off limits again. Just crack on with your usual habits. And this is where people will often give up. They'll overeat a few times on something and be like, no, I just can't ever eat that. You definitely have to go through the process with this. And on that note, remember, it is a process. Just like a process of getting faster at running or getting stronger in the gym. And there may be times where we all intentionally or unintentionally overeat, like I said, and that is totally okay. So if you're struggling to navigate this is a huge part of the work that I do with a lot of folks in Fuzz Culture Club. So if you do want to have that virtual coffee chat with me that I mentioned at the beginning, talk about what parts of this you're struggling with and see if my coaching might be helpful, DM me on Instagram, fill in the form in the show notes, we'll have that virtual coffee. I'll let you know if I can help, and there's absolutely no pressure to sign up with me after if it doesn't feel like it's a good fit. So have an amazing rest of your week, Cultivate family. I hope you enjoyed more of my injury turmoil stories. Hopefully I won't have one for you next week. Take it easy, Cultivate family. That is me out. Bye.